This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 369 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about travel and language learning. Firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast on a beautiful sunny day. So I love learning languages. We've had an episode about language learning probably every year of the podcast so far, and I have told a lot of my stories. But today I have 4 guests to tell their stories about learning languages while they travel, because they want to travel, because they're immersed in another culture and language, all kinds of reasons and experiences. And I hope that wherever you are in your journey of language learning in connection to your travel, you'll get some inspiration from them. My first guest is Chris Magnuson. Now, Chris learnt French in high school. He loved it. He wanted to learn more. He was, I would say, low-key obsessed. He did things like record Canadian hockey games off the radio, like the French commentary from Quebec, and then listen to it over and over and over just to try and learn more French. And eventually, he did get to go to France on a student exchange.
So I got my first job and I saved up money, and then I went on nacelle cultural exchanges to France for the summer. So it was 4 weeks. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm here to learn French, and I'm in this family, and I'm in Annecy, France, which is like this amazing, beautiful town in the Alps. I completely lucked out.
Wow.
I hit the jackpot with families. But I was like, how do I learn this language? Right? Because I had maybe 2 years of French under my belt, which is...
And a lot of hockey games.
And a lot of Canadian hockey, right? And I'm like, how do I do this? I just got to start asking questions. And so I was like incessantly asking questions. I remember sitting in the car and being like, where did you buy these tissues? And my host mom was like, at the grocery store. But then she's like, see, that says, I forget the name of it, but it was like the generic brand. So I had this like completely ham-fisted conversation about generic brands. And then we're at dinner. Where are the potatoes from? I'm always trying to think about what's the question I need to be asking. I'm bothering my family. I'm going to go into town and I'm going to ask for direction. I know where I'm going. I'm not lost.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask as many times as possible to ask for directions. And it was fun.
How did you have the confidence to do this as a teenager?
I don't know.
Because, a lot of people still struggle as adults when they're trying to learn a foreign language. That's always the hardest part, is to actually speak it.
I think the thing is you're connecting with strangers. Nobody cares. They don't know you. You don't know them. You're never going to see them again. You got nothing to lose. And the other thing, too, is like you got to put in the reps. If you don't, teaching a language, you're in a French class. How much French do you actually speak in that hour of your class?
Yeah.
If you actually had a stopwatch of the amount of time you're speaking in that class, it probably comes up to maybe 3 minutes out of an hour. If your teacher is good, maybe 10 minutes. And if it's a one-on-one, that's a totally different thing, of course. In a school classroom, you're getting 0 reps in, right? And so that was kind of like my attitude. It's just, I got to get the reps in. So I would just walk around town, walk around Annecy, walk around Saint-Julien, and just be like, hey, where's the church? And then they would say something to me, and I had no idea what they said. And I'd go to the next person, I'd be like, hey, where's this place? And I would try to repeat what they said, kind of be like, oh, so you mean down to the left and to the right? And be like, no, this way, go the way. And I would say 95% of the time, that was it. That was the interaction. It was like 5-10 seconds, boom. Yeah. And there was that 1 or 2 people that would be like, hey, where are you from? What are you doing? And you start a conversation. And then that conversation is more reps. Right?
Yeah,
so it's,
exactly. Yeah.
It's all about the reps. And I think listening to the radio is a great way to do that too. And I was doing that in France too. I was like, I'm here, I'm gonna listen to it. And the other thing too is just like, get in that bubble. Do not speak any English. And I'll never forget, I was there for 4 weeks, and it was literally like 2 days before coming home. My host mom, Jacques, she just asked me a question. I'll never forget, I was washing my hands at that hallway sink in France. It's not inside the bathroom, it's in the hallway. And she's in the kitchen. She's like, hey, Chris. I have no idea what the question was. She's like, and I just answered her.
Just automatically.
And I just had this like euphoric moment. I was like, I did not translate. I just answered her. Oh my gosh.
I'm so impressed by how determined Chris was as a teenager to master French and how brave he was to go out and speak to strangers. I definitely need to learn from that. I am not always that good at doing that. I think it's natural, it's easy to feel shy when you're trying to use another language, especially if you can't use it particularly well. But I am going to kind of try and channel my teenage Chris next time I'm in this situation. Chris actually went on to tell me he's gone on to have a lifelong relationship with that host family. For example, in the US, they've hosted the French family's grandkids, all sorts of things. So super delightful. Now, my next guest is Spiri Tsintziras. Spiri was born in Australia, but to Greek parents. And so I asked her about her experience with the Greek language.
My parents only spoke Greek at home because my mum hardly learnt any English. My dad learnt more than mum. So we were forced to speak Greek, and I was forced to go to Greek school, and I hated every minute of it. But it was the best thing they could have done for us because I speak Greek reasonably fluently. When I went to Greece, I realised how bad my Greek was, in fact, because it was a very basic sort of home, what we call kitchen Greek, like the sort of everyday functional Greek that you need to kind of communicate on a day-to-day level. But when I went to Greece, people speak so fast. I couldn't understand the news, for example. And the slang, it just changes. And so the language I was speaking was sort of language from the 60s, village life. And then the streets of Athens, it was so amazing to hear the language, but I just couldn't keep up. I was a little bit shy to speak at first because I didn't want to sound like an idiot. But at one point, I had a small scholarship in Greece to look at health systems, and I went to a seminar in Crete actually for a week with other educationalists. And by the end of that week, I'd found my voice, and I just thought, I'm going to speak, and it doesn't matter if it's not right. Look, I can't lie; it's a benefit to speak Greek in Greece. The experience is good. It's great to be able to speak the language in any country.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, goes without saying. But having said that, it's not absolutely mandatory, I think.
I have one more related question. Have you taught your kids to speak Greek?
Oh,
it's okay. I have a similar failure story.
It's a failure story even before I told it, Amanda.
Just from your face.
Look, my daughter would speak with my mum in Greek, and so she's got a little bit of a grounding. I married a man from Malta, and we're both, he's not Australian born, but we both speak English at home. And I tried to send my kids to Greek school, even though I hated it. And they sort of hated it too, but I thought, please just give it a shot. And my son hated it so much that, we piked. We piked within a couple of years. We went to Greece, and, everyone said, why haven't you taught your kids Greek? And I'm like, it's just so hard.
It's not easy.
Like I said, my daughter understands quite well and will speak basic Greek. And my son says, why didn't you teach us Greek now?
As I said to Spiri, I have a similar tale of woe. I had dreams of my son, whose dad is German, and I speak pretty fluent German myself. I had dreams of him growing up speaking perfect fluent German, but it was not to be. He does have some pretty good basics, and he can understand a lot. But I do hope in the future he'll probably spend more time there, I think, and it will be at least easier for him to learn. And I am sure that Spiri and I are not the only parents who had this dream of bilingual children and didn't quite manage it. It is hard for lots and lots of reasons. My next guest is Ros Belford. She decided back in the early 2000s to leave London and take her two small daughters to live in Sicily. Quite a bold and brave move. And I asked her how she had initially learnt Italian.
I'd started learning Italian when I was in my early 20s. I was really sad. I was teaching, hated it, and just dreamed of Italy. And so I thought, I'm going to learn Italian. So I started going to night classes. And I can tell you, Amanda, it was the only thing I really enjoyed. And I would just speak it and imagine that I was there, un cappuccino, per favore. And it was like even having the Italian in my mouth made me feel better. I spent ages trying to get the accent right. I remember a teacher saying, don't just speak Italian, Ros. You need to be Italian. You need to walk into a room and you need to own it.
That's
like,
so cool.
okay. However, when I first went to Italy for work, I was 26, very, very excited. I got to Milan and I was going to have to use Italian for the first time for real. So I got into the metro station and I completely blanked. I just froze. I stood at the desk and I thought, what's the Italian for a ticket? And then biglietto. So I managed to say biglietto. Then the guy in the ticket office tried to rip me off. He gave me change for 10,000 euros instead of 50,000 euros. And suddenly, abracadabra, my Italian began to flow.
Because I don't want to get ripped off.
It was like, it's like, no, ho dato 50, non 10. And so I was like, all like being very Italian about it. That teaching about being Italian was so true. And it's like, and I think as soon as your emotions are engaged, you need to speak it, you speak it. And in fact, with my friend Emma, I've done little bits of teaching now and again of English. And what we always do is try and get people responding for real, doing stupid things with them or funny things so that the language comes out instinctively, not, that you can sit down and plan it in your head.
So you get out of your brain, essentially.
Yeah, to get out of your brain. The first thing is just to get you saying it. It's not easy as a teacher. It's not easy as a student, but that is what you need to do. Whereas the children learnt it very quickly. I mean, their very first word was caramelle, which is sweet.
Very sensible.
Yes. So, someone says, so we walk into this hotel and there's one of those bowls of, boiled sweets that they often have at Italian hotels on the reception. That Izzy's looking, going like, who are those sweets for, mummy? And the lady from the hotel noticed and said, Gioia, vuoi una caramella? And Izzy goes, So she takes one. Juno, who's 2, grabs a whole handful. And then she says, caramella.
Fast learner when it's
straight away. Yeah. Most useful word for a child that exists, caramella.
Oh,
I think, if you're traveling, learn a little bit of whatever language first, but remember the words for the things that you really love. The words that the things you love that will really make a difference. And it could be anything from where do I go for a sunset? Yeah. Or where do I go for an ice cream? Or where do I go for pizza? Your favorite thing or your favorite thing to ask for in the shop. Chocolate, learn those and you'll remember them because they bring you back what you want. Yeah. You're getting what you want. You're motivated. You need to go to your base motivation.
I love the idea of taking special note of things you love. I have made a note to learn how to say chocolate in every language for my future travels. Thanks, Ros. Now, Ros and I also spoke about how you can sometimes get by without knowing much of the language at all.
I was just traveling with a friend who didn't speak any Italian, but was really, really interested. I mean, I think she's done a little bit of Duolingo, and she's intelligent, very, very good at reading faces and body language. And I was so surprised how much she could follow what was going on. So we'd have an interaction and then she'd go, so was he saying this? And then what was he saying about such and such? So just the odd word in the context, the body language, the face. She was really following it. I thought that was really, really interesting. And I mean, one thing when I arrived, my Italian was okay, but it wasn't brilliant. Also because I was solely responsible for the girls. It was like, our lives depended on what I understood. It was like really important. I wasn't just on holiday. I really, really had to learn to read body language and faces. It was a really good lesson in that, because sometimes people can sound like they're shouting and they're not. It's just getting excited how they speak. Generally, I mean, just thinking when you go abroad, I'm able to understand people in my own culture, and I'm not just doing it listening to what they say. I'm also observing them and making yourself do that more. That will be a huge help. And then you start picking up the odd word and thinking, okay, well, he was saying that and he was sounding happy, or he was saying that and he was looking like no. You can get quite a lot. That said, it's a long time since I was thinking about this. It's a long time since I've been anywhere where I didn't speak the language. And I think I hang back. I kind of avoid going anywhere I don't speak a language. And I think I need to, because I think it's a good thing to do.
I think this is so true, and perhaps it comes from having a lot of experiences like this. I remember when I lived in Japan, I would be out with my Japanese friends and not necessarily understand much of what they would say, especially in the early times, but I would pick up bits here and there. And yeah, it's amazing what you can understand from a word or two, a context, facial expressions, gestures, all sorts of things. Last month in Bangkok, for example, my friend Vincy would often speak either in Thai or in Cantonese with friends or relatives that we met up with. And that also reminded me there's a lot you can gather from observing those conversations. It's sometimes from an English word peppered in, and it's a lot, of course, from the context, the faces and the gestures. Now, my final guest today is Megan Frye. Megan has done a lot of really deep immersion and been to language schools to help with her language learning over the years. So it was super interesting to talk to her. And we talked about kind of different levels of immersion when you are heading to another country to learn a language.
I think immersion is really the way to go with language learning. And if that's something that you're able to do around your hometown, that's fantastic. If it's something that you need to go far and wide to do, I think that that's primarily what the basis of my travel has been for the past 22 years is language learning. I didn't grow up in a place where a lot of people were speaking anything other than English. So I really, in order to be forced to speak the language, I really think that you have to go to a place where you really don't have the option, and you can find the level of which you feel comfortable with that, like where there's really nobody that speaks it. You can find, English, for example, like you can find that. If there's some people that speak it, or if there's a lot of people that speak it, probably for a beginner, I would say middle of the road is best, because otherwise it can be a very isolating experience and maybe a little bit, nerve wracking. But eventually you want to get to the point where like you really are forced to speak it. And I've noticed in Sao Paulo recently and hanging out with a friend and friends of this friend. And yes, I can speak Portuguese. Yes, I can get my way through a conversation, but there is a limitation that I have. Absolutely. And so when I'm speaking with these folks, their English is very good. So at some point it's like, okay, stop. Like if they really want to know me, we're going to speak English. If I really want to know them, like, why would we Portuguese? I mean, yes, there's certain things where I can throw in some Portuguese words and I say phrases and things like that. And I understand, if they're having a conversation in Portuguese, but I'm not going to learn that much from them yet, unless I'm just like joining in on a lunch, which I was the other day, and they were speaking and I picked up a lot of different phrases that I don't know. But in terms of like one-on-one, that kind of thing, it's just you really, really, really have to go to a place where like you and the other person, the people that you're speaking with, have no choice but to make it work somehow. And when I say that, I do want to say that, have respect for people's time and effort when they're doing that, because it can be really hard to understand someone who doesn't know your language and they're trying to speak it and they don't have the pronunciation and they don't say the right words and they don't know how to conjugate the verbs and they don't have good grammar, whatever it is. And you have to listen very intently and try to understand what they're saying. So I'm sure we've all been on that side too. So just remember that, like when you are in an immersive setting, for that reason, I tend to try to go for smaller towns, places that people generally are not in a huge rush,
Yes.
I'm not going to try to practice my, burgeoning, blossoming Portuguese on a busy cashier, at the peak hour at a supermarket in Sao Paulo. If they speak English, we're going to speak English, but it's not necessary at this point. But I'm sure when I add another language that is much more distant from, maybe it's not a Romance language or it's distant from Spanish more, it will be an issue at some point.
That's so true. I mean, I taught English as a foreign language for many years, and when I was based in particular countries, like in Japan, I knew a lot about the mistakes they would make or the, false friend kind of words they would use. So I could really easily interpret, because I spent hours and hours and hours doing this, I could really easily interpret their, like, a beginner's attempts at English. Whereas if I go to, somewhere else where I haven't spent time doing that, you're right, it's like exhausting trying to understand someone who's got beginner English.
Yeah.
And I'm sure equally so, it's absolutely exhausting for them trying to understand my beginner, version of their language. So that's a very valid point.
Yeah, you want to choose a place where you have, ideally, so I'm a big fan of going to small language schools, be probably in a medium-sized city to smaller. So we're talking like maybe, I don't know what a medium-sized city is in this world anymore, but, 1 million or less, 500,000 or less. And if you can find something more in like the 200,000 range, that can be helpful. But it's also just wherever you want to go, and studying the language that you want to study that generally is spoken in a place that you want to spend a lot of time, because that's what it's going to take. Or you really love, the film from there. You really love the music, like something that you're really, committed to. Passionate about, because what language requires is exposure, being exposed to it and then repeating it, parroting. A lot of these small immersive language schools, they're run by local people. They're run by, it's like usually a small business, local teachers, locally run. You can even stay there usually if you want, or they can put you in a family homestay, or you can get a hotel room, whatever you feel more comfortable with, or an apartment. It's really a fun way to engage with the community, with the school. And oftentimes it can be really, really, really affordable, because sometimes they'll give you food. It just depends. This recent Brazil, I had a whole package of 20 hours of class a week plus meals and accommodation for 5 weeks. There's a lot of these little schools around the world. So I just encourage you to think outside the box and consider having, if you're really serious about language learning, consider your next vacation really being something like that, where you're dedicating at least 2 weeks if you have the time.
Megan and I also talked about accessing language tutors online before or during or after your trip. And she recommended the Preply website, Preply, as a great place to meet language tutors. So I will leave a link in the show notes to Preply. I would really love to do an immersive language trip at some stage in the future. So I love the idea of seeking out a language school in a smaller town. That was a great piece of advice. So, thank you very much for listening to episode 369 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast, all about travel and language learning. Massive thanks to all my guests for their insights and stories. I first chatted with Chris Magnuson. You can find more about Chris at streetviewvagabond.com or look up Street View Vagabond on Instagram. To find out more about Spiri's writing, you can go to writingspirit.com.au, and Spiri's new book, 12 Golden Gifts, will be linked in the show notes. Ros Belford has more info at her website, rosbelford.com, and she has a new book out too called Children of the Volcano. There's a link in the show notes for that. And I lastly spoke with Megan Frye. More about Megan at meganfrye.com. That's Frye, Frye. And as I promised, I'll leave a link to the Preply website where you can access language tutors, which Megan recommends. As always, don't forget to come and join our conversations. Tell us more about your language learning experiences, good or bad, or any suggestions as well. Come along to the Facebook group or the LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. And don't forget, you can find out more about what we do with the Thoughtful Travel brand, everything that we talk about at the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter on Substack at thoughtfultravel.substack.com. Lots of info and interesting stories coming out there as well. All of these links and much more in the show notes for this episode. You can find them at notaballerina.com/369. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.